All right, we are back with the GSMC Wrestling Laureate podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Eric Rodriguez, here every Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. Pacific time, 11 p.m. Eastern time, here to talk about the greatest thing in the world, professional wrestling. We talk about all the action inside and outside of the ring, backstage curtain calls. We talk about, drama, rumors behind the scenes. We talk about superstar inactive statuses, injury updates. We also talk about, we talk about their contract negotiations, extensions, and signings from promotions from WWE to AEW. If it makes major news in the world of professional wrestling, we talk about it. Sorry, excuse me. I just got done eating. I apologize. Uh, we talk about it here on this show, 1010%. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about this Netflix docuseries that was, Mr. McMahon. The first episode, obviously, just, you know, talking about how WWF slash WWE became such a huge conglomerate in the world of professional wrestling, in the world of entertainment. Getting guest stars, like Cindy Lauper, and also, Muhammad Ali, then, getting guys like Mike Tyson and Mr. T, and they showed up on SNL. I, sometimes you feel like you do have to throw flowers to like Vince McMahon as an overall kind of like a promoter. His father never really wanted him to take over the business. He was actually, against it. And then once when he saw the territory starting to falter to Mr. McMahon and coming to the WWF, a lot of fans kind of disagreed with it, especially with a lot of promotions that were just like, all right, like they basically stole a lot of superstars and most of them debuted around the time of WrestleMania 1. And a lot of, especially talking about, Ted Turner, how Vince McMahon was, kind of a little hypocritical saying that Ted was, this badass, monster billionaire businessman who was willing to topple over WWE. They were the little guy. They were, this little darling. And although it, wasn't really that kind of, that much of like a discrepancy or anything like that, like I said before, ultimately watching this, you kind of found out a lot of things about professional wrestling that, to be honest, I kind of read reports and kind of knew a little bit about this, but I can understand how it can come to, quite a shock to, a lot of the fans out there. Vince McMahon even said in the documentary, he said, and I quote, "I wish I could tell you the real stories. I'll give you enough that it's semi interesting. I don't want anybody to really, know me." And I feel like Vince on the documentary looked like a guy who'd never really had any remorse, who never really, for every messed up thing that he's done in the past, didn't really seem like he felt bad about it. Like, you know what I mean? Kind of like a sociopath. And a lot of people, like a lot of reviews I did read, said that Vince McMahon, during the documentary kind of came off like he lost it. Like he doesn't really, know exactly where he stands and that was something that was talked about in WWE. The reason why he was first left WWE after the hush money scandal and stuff like that. How this guy would book matches after matches that was just and storylines that were the same thing because he never knew what he did a week before. And it just, it definitely drove WWE to the ground. As he got older and as things started, you know, propagating and things started coming up, and it was just, it was kind of crazy. It was kind of crazy. In the early days when Vince McMahon was involved in professional wrestling, um, the way he promoted a lot of young superstars, like The Rock, during the Attitude Era, like, Triple H, and then he wanted Shawn Michaels as well. Um, and I don't know, it's just kind of crazy how Hulk Hogan was such an important piece to the WWF and the WWE, starting off. And then after everything that happened, and him saying after all the the steroid scandals and stuff like that, kind of being hated by the fans, Hulk Hogan was kind of like, all right, gonna take time away from WWE. He told Mr. McMahon that he's done wrestling. I don't want to do anything like that. But he was a Hollywood star. He was approaching in Hollywood. I guess he was filming a movie or a TV show. I'm not too sure what it was. And then Eric Bischoff said that he had a chance to speak to Hulk Hogan. And he was like, I want this guy to come to WCW. And then as soon as Hogan came to WCW, then you just saw this domino effect where, you saw I forgot who the women's champion was. Who she threw the belt inside the trash can. On live TV. Eric Bischoff, because WWE was taped. Giving out all the results and stuff like that, and it was very narcissistic, but at the same time, it was genius. It was genius what Bischoff was doing. It was basically like, why are you going to watch this, trash company where you can watch WCW and WCW? I think it was for 83 weeks in a row. I think it was. Don't quote me on that. For 83 weeks in a row, they toppled over Monday Night Raw, and it was absolutely, it was crazy. It got to a point where Vince McMahon was, he was in trouble. He was in trouble. He knew that he had to bring in some star power. He knew that he had to switch things up. Obviously, still to this day, a lot of wrestling fans felt like he still kind of stole the gist of the Attitude Era from what was going on WCW. The way that DX was, they were acting and stuff like that, and all these wrestlers that were sleeping with other superstars that were using performance enhancing drugs behind the scenes, and then they decided to put the belt on someone stable like Bret the Hitman Hart. And Bret Hart was, at the peak of his excellence. He had this, he had this guaranteed contract that him and Vince McMahon were working out, where he would have been absolutely one of the highest paid wrestlers in the world. If not, would have been like one of the most controversial, crucial contract in terms of any sports entertainer. That's how big it was. And Vince was all for it, but then he, at the last minute, he pulled out, basically being like, I don't really want to be indebted to any other superstar. But Brett was definitely the best thing in professional wrestling. When he left the WCW after the Montreal screw job, I don't want to necessarily bag on Bret Hart. I don't, going to WCW, and Vince knew that this was going to happen. Leaving with the belt would have just absolutely crushed the credibility of the WWF/WWE. Once again, because you had Hall and you had Nash go over there as well. Then you had who's then eventually Bret Hart, and then Lex Luger, who was in that storyline of he was still a WWE superstar, but literally like the day after his contract expired, they pursued him and they brought him to WCW. And it was it it was to a point where you kind of saw WWE kind of come to its last, you know, kind of its last breath, and they were doing so damn much to try to sway the ratings, but it was hard because at the time Ted Turner and Eric Bischoff put on they put on an amazing, wrestling promotion that was cutting edge. It was very new and edgy and cool and awesome, and really resonated with the key demographic of age 19 to 41-year-olds, not really appealing to like the kids side. And that's something that WWE ultimately like doing. But of course, then they kind of created this whole attitude era, where they were kind of doing some crazy stuff on air, sexual innuendos and stuff like that. And it brought fans back to the WWF, and it left WCW to kind of leave and kind of stew. And at the end of the, kind of seemed like it imploded. I feel like WCW imploded mostly because you had a lot of of egos inside the room. You had a lot of people in charge of their own creative control, which is bad. Which is bad. It could make or break an entertainment industry. Kind of like what I like to compare it to, like everybody watches the Marvel movies. Everybody watched Avengers Endgame. What if Robert Downey Jr. was like, no, I don't want my character to die. I have creative control. Iron Man's gonna survive. But Iron Man dying was, he was the first ever Avenger, like really like introduced, and it was just poetic justice, not justice. It was just crazy. It was ironic. It was, he died. He put himself on the line. He had not had the reputation of being that type of guy, and it just helped the story make sense, and it kind of perpetuated. and it helped promote a lot of like the Spider-Man movies as well, like the Guardians of the Galaxy. You have no more Tony Stark. Captain America was gone as well. You had these superstars kind of go off, kind of leave. And I know it's a an interesting comparison, but just imagine if Tony Stark and Robert Downey Jr. was like, no, my character's not going to die, and it just wouldn't have that same entertainment factor. So I feel like it got to the point where the talent was in so much control, so much in disarray of what they wanted to do, that it ultimately kind of drove them to the ground. But and of course, everything that happened with the whole, and I'll keep this brief, with the whole Chris Benoit thing. It was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. Everything with the CTEs, the brain injuries, and if you think about it, everything that happened with Chris Benoit in the past, he took so much damage to the brain. It was, it affects you. Like, look what happened with NFL stars like Aaron Hernandez or Junior Seau. Like, it gets to the point where you really can't control your thoughts and emotions, and if you're stuck in this state of depression, it's just gonna get worse and worse. So I thought it was interesting how Vince McMahon was kind of asked about that. Also, in the docuseries, you saw Owen Hart, how he tragically passed away, how they ultimately did investigate it, and it was just a freak accident. It was the manufacturer of the harness that were actually, they were sued and stuff like that, because at first Owen Hart's widow wanted to sue the WWE, and it was who can blame her during that kind of run. And then of course later on on episode 5 and episode 6, it kind of started rounding out to basically how Vince McMahon was, and how he still, I feel like, the way he was perpetuated and the way he was perceived on the documentary, that he didn't seem like he was done with professional wrestling. It seemed like he was still kind of not being the character of Mr. McMahon, because I feel like there was no difference between the character you saw perceived on screen and also Vince McMahon behind the stage. And that's nuts. It's crazy. And now of course we're going to get into our next segment, where Vince McMahon is reportedly, rumored, conspiracy theories. Obviously, we love talking about him. Might be starting a new wrestling promotion. All right, but before we move into any of that, I got a couple of chats from my man Anthony Mazzano. Honestly, I'm thinking it's going to be revealed that Nunzio has been running things over Tony, and Nunzio is the boss of all bosses. Joking around, I think Vince McMahon might be starting his own adult entertainment company for movies. That's pretty funny, actually. That's pretty funny. For me, I'm surprised a lot of fans turned against Spread with that whole question, but I don't see the same fans turning against Medusa for throwing the belt. Oh, okay, that was her name. Throwing the belt on Monday Night Nitro. I'm surprised that a lot of fans state supportive of Brett, but I saw a lot of fans turn against Medusa for throwing her title in the garbage on Nitro. I would probably think more like the discrepancy between how women wrestlers were perceived at that moment, and Bret Hart as well. But it was a huge deal. Like I said before, the wrestling WWF were, they got desperate. They got desperate. It was like, which idea is going to work? Because if we mess up and if we miss anything that could help our competitors, Eric Bischoff and Ted Turner, if it helps their promotion look better, then we're effed. Then we're screwed. There's no going back after that. But I definitely agree with a lot of people turning against Medusa instead of Bret the Hitman Hart. But overall, definitely, I feel like this Netflix documentary is a must watch. I would definitely check it out if I was a wrestling fan. For me, watching it kind of helped my history of trying to line up the stars, because I had no idea how important wrestling was in the 80s, how it definitely helped shape WWF and WWE for futures to come. And of course, like, obviously talking in 12 minutes about the documentary, I definitely missed a lot more. Obviously, you had the Attitude Era. You had everything going down backstage between Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, and the whole China situation about her being heartbroken, eventually kind of spiraling down dark and windy and just terrible road that forced her into like using drugs, due to depression, anxiety, and stuff like that. Obviously, a lot to talk about. It'd be kind of interesting to kind of share a little bit more about this documentary on a different day. All right, but like I said before on the documentary, one thing I noticed that Vince McMahon seemed like he was still playing character. Doesn't seem like he was, trying in any way, shape, or form say anything to tarnish his reputation. Because I feel like him starting a new wrestling promotion is it's possible. It's possible, and we're going to talk about it when we return. So hey, do not go anywhere.